Oh, well, normally one would say good morning, but it's not even the best of mornings. Just so people know, it is 10 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday, October 10th. This is when we're recording this conversation, Pandas playing cello. And it's 10 o'clock Pacific time, so it's 1 o'clock on the East Coast, and early evening in the Middle East. And so Julia and I wanted to share our perspectives on the horrible events and the continuing events. We have quite different perspectives and backgrounds that we bring to our reaction, which I think hopefully is useful. Julia.
Yeah, I've been thinking about what do I want to say? We briefly talked about having a guest, because almost there's an instinct like maybe we don't say anything and we have a guest, and now I'm just like, you know what, actually that's too much to ask of someone else anyway, and really just talking as people, as our own reactions, I think is really more real. And so we're not making political statements, we're making just like, this is what I feel. and and that's kind of our thing anyway. But this morning I woke up crying. I found tears in my eyes, just because there's just such a loss of potential. And well, not just because there's such a loss of potential, and because of all the killing and
You mean human potential, human lives?
human lives and human potential, and
Yes.
and potential of lives that are, people are still alive, but now there's trauma that will have an impact on the future. And just thinking about this in terms of Simchat Torah, which is the holiday where this occurred, and on Shabbat, and I sort of decided that's what I want to talk about, is what does that mean? What does that mean? What is Simchat Torah to Jews, or at least in my experience?
And you identify as Jewish.
I'm Jewish, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Just because people, I don't think we've ever mentioned that before.
No, we did in the first episode.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and so and I'm an interesting sort of class of Jewish because I converted, but I converted because of a conviction that there was a long-standing Jewish heritage in my family that wasn't discussed. And actually, I brought one of my little Easter eggs here. Actually, I guess I want to start with that. This is a it's double wrapped in baggies. This is a Torah scroll, a miniature Torah scroll that sort of would probably be given to like a child or something, that has been in my family for generations. My family, my father's family, who didn't know that there was any Jewish history there, that this is my grandmother's note about it, which says, I think this is a Chinese scroll that has been in the family for a long time. But Chinese reads down, but this reads across. Like, she's confused. She doesn't recognize that it's Hebrew, but it's been passed down in her family very carefully for a long time.
Wow.
So I asked for it from my father, but you can see it's just it's a Torah scroll. And part of my conversion story is this experience of having a dream, where my grandmother came to me after she died in the dream, and she said, if there was one prayer that I lived by, it was avodah. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know much Hebrew. I didn't know any Hebrew, I think, at that point. And so I went, I had been attending like maybe 2 services at a synagogue, and I went to the rabbi, who at that time was Brant Rosen, who is famous for his very controversial views on as a rabbi on Israel and Palestinian conflict in general. And I said to him, well, I don't get it. What is avodah? And he said, well, in terms of prayers, Amidah sounds closest to Avodah, and Amidah is a prayer that we say on high holidays, like Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Avodah means work. So in my dream, my grandmother communicated to me via a word I did not know or did not consciously know that the prayer that she thought was most powerful was work. And that came back to me today when I was thinking of, okay, what is there to do here? What can you do? What can you do? I'm like kind of in grief right now about the whole thing. Not kind of, I am in grief about the whole thing, but about the end of this potential for a peaceful solution that could evolve. I'm not going to say it won't. It could evolve into a peaceful solution, but I'm in grief about what happened. And what is there to do? Well, there's work, and that is, I started crying, I think, because of that. But I don't know, because I woke up crying. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I sorry, I think I'm about to sneeze.
Bless you.
Thank you. Thank you. I've worked in this international space, national security, for a long time. And so I think that tends to inure you. Is that the right word? It tends to insulate
Get inured, yeah.
From a lot of these emotional reactions. Although I do have them, because your job as an intelligence analyst is to be as objective and as dispassionate as you can possibly be, and so that's my training, and that's how I think about and deal with a lot of issues that come up. I did work early in my career, about 40 years ago, on the Middle East, on Lebanon, actually, when there was a huge war between Hezbollah and the Israelis. And then there was also the Lebanese civil war. And one of the things that I cynically learned to do, kind of my cynical heuristic, is I would, when trying to understand what would happen next, I would imagine what's the stupidest thing any of the people, parties to the conflict, could do. And sure enough, that is what they did. So it was a quite an easy intellectual and analytic lift.
But wait a minute.
Huh?
Well, can we talk about that a little?
Yeah,
Because that's
no,
super
absolutely.
interesting. Stupid from the point of view of the goal of what? Because I think
from
that,
the point of view of ending the conflict.
right, and that's not what they wanted.
And of course, that's not what they want.
So if it's stupid from that point of view, it's smart from the point of view of this other motivation.
Yes, exactly.
And that's what I get back to Simchat Torah is, why do you attack? Let's say you're planning this attack. I'm just thinking from a Palestinian point of view. You want to change the situations. You want to start a revolution. Apparently, you want to plan an attack. Why do you plan it on Simchat Torah? And so just thinking about that is just like, you have to understand what Simchat Torah is. Can I talk about that briefly?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so Simchat Torah is this holiday. It's this, first of all, of course, very holy. The high holidays are around there. It's all very holy, but it's very culturally about Jews being public with their Jewishness. So in many countries, that's the only time when Jews will go out into the street and dance with the Torah. And so their neighbors know they're Jewish, right? So that people know that they're Jewish. I was converted into the Reconstructionist tradition. In the Reconstructionist tradition, we, at least in my synagogue and several other synagogues, we wrap the children of the congregation in the Torah. So the adults hold the Torah scroll all around the room, and the children dance in the center. So that we tell them, you're safe in the Torah. You're being held by the Torah. The Torah, which is a holy document for Christians. They call it the Old Testament. For Muslims, they call it Torah. I probably mispronounced that. You're safe here, right? And this is celebration of just being Jewish. And it's also this connection over time. So it's this like incredibly physical, because of the unwrapping of the Torah, which evolves over time, a physical description of what it feels like to connect to, what year is it? 5,784 years of Jewish history, right? Always the Torah has been there, right? For those years. And so it's literally like saying, in terms of how we think about time, it's saying, time is a circle. You have to consider all of it. When you're in a relationship with someone, you consider everything they've done in the past, present, and maybe into the future, right? This is continuing to unfold. Torah is continuing to be written. So, such a reminder, if your music festival, if your kibbutz, if your family, if your children, parents, etc., are attacked on this day, such a reminder that you have to consider all of history, that while Torah is still being written, you're still connected to this history, you're connected to trying to make a safe place for Jews, and you're connected to your children. I mean, so if you're a group of people who feel that you've been oppressed by this other group of people, and I think there's no question that there's oppression there, right? I hope that's not controversial. It seems objectively true. And you want a revolution. Attacking on this day does not feel like a smart thing to do if you are trying to get sort of the world behind your view that you're oppressed and you need help. This particular day, I'm not saying that on another day it would be a great thing either. I'm just saying like, look at what's being done. Look at the choice that was made, and then look at the motivation. And then that's what gives me grief, is the motive. Like, I puzzle over the motivation. I puzzle over that.
Yeah, well, I don't know that we'll ever know whether or not Hamas did it deliberately because of that holiday. It was also the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, plus 1 day, which is viewed by Arabs as a great victory for their cause, despite how it ended up at the end. The fact that they were able to have such significant early successes against the Israelis is very important to the sense of pride of the Palestinian people.
Well, I mean, and so there's also, like, when we talk about this, it's like so inaccurate in a way to think of the Palestinian people as one chunk and the Jewish people of Israel as one chunk, because there are people actively that I know working for some kind of two-state solution or something in Israel, and Palestinians, at least that I know in the US, who are holding this whole situation in love and hoping. I mean, so there's this. Well, these are sort of, they feel like two tribes. Here are two tribes that share so much DNA, so much cultural heritage, so many holy sites, that it feels like almost a civil war, right? I mean,
well, I actually think that it is, in fact, a civil war, which is what makes it so. One of the things that contributes to its continuation, and to the fact that it's so difficult to resolve. You said the words two-state solution. It's a two-state something or other.
you don't think it's a solution?
I don't think it's a solution.
What do you think is sustainable? I mean, is anything sustainable?
Well, eventually nothing sustains over a particularly long period of time, except I think China would argue that it has sustained itself for a really long period of time, its culture and its society. I think, one thing, I only worked on the Middle East for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years directly. And but it taught me that there, are probably very few problems that humans can solve in this sort of political social arena, that sometimes only the passage of time can deal with a problem. I'm not going to even use the word solve. That I think what we have in the in the classic Arab-Israeli conflict is something that probably, again, take the passage of time, a lot of generational displacement, perhaps extraordinary other extraneous factors that will somehow bring things to a head, whether it's, the alien invasion in Independence Day that forces all these people, different societies, to talk with each other and cooperate. But I think that what happens a lot, this is my observation, what happens a lot is that the humans, particularly the professionals, like the diplomats or whatever they are, think tank people, get all busy, all frothy, trying to come up with their solution and implement their solution. And none of those are solutions. And in fact, where we are today began in, a long time ago, probably a century ago, with the implementation of another solution. So every so-called solution implemented is simply a seed germination
It's a
area
thing to do to
for
distract. Yeah.
for the next set of problems.
I mean,
And
psychologically, I think those solutions, and it's interesting, I said two-state solution too, because I also think exactly as you say that solutions unfold. Torah is still being written, right?
yes,
It's a psychological distraction from the fact that we don't know what to do, and that
yes,
we have grief
exactly.
about that, and we feel helpless. And so I do see that. I do see people breaking up into these camps of people who think they immediately know what to do and that it's simple. Like, well, if Israel would just blah, or
Yeah,
if, Palestinians would just blah. And
right,
it's like anyone who's thought about the situation for longer than 15 minutes knows that
exactly.
that
Yes,
is too simple, and
right,
that time is our friend here. I agree with that completely. Time is our friend here.
right. And yeah, I was going to think of something. I was going to say something else, but of course it has slipped my mind. Yeah, I mean, so for example, just on some specifics about Gaza, I was researching this morning, why does Gaza have so many people? Why are there 2 million people in this little strip of land? And of course, you can trace that back to the creation of Israel in 1948, the immediate war conflict that occurred. Apparently something like 200,000 Palestinians showed up in the Gaza area, presumably people that had either, felt forced out of where they had lived or believed that they needed to leave, psychologically felt that they were being forced out. And so I can see how 200,000 people who arrived 3 to 4 generations ago, that's why there are so many people in the Gaza. That is why it is so heavily populated. So it is a direct consequence of something that was once viewed as a solution.
Right, but let's talk about what isn't the solution. Because that may be more, we might get, I mean, just again, it's always, to me, it's back to the feelings and intuitions on this, but it feels to me like this is not, for me, this is completely non-professional, right? This is just like, woke up one morning, and I was just like, ugh. For you, it's more professional. But for me, because I'm getting interested in the world of intelligence, I want to talk about what isn't a solution, and it feels to me like so sort of here's the basic question, almost from a philosophical standpoint. What are the characteristics of something that isn't a solution? Because let's use the word solution. We know that nothing is ever final and everything changes, including China, right? Regardless of what it says, it's changed a lot, right? So nothing's ever final. Everything changes. That's fine. That's the way reality works, humans and the rest of reality. So what does it mean to solve something? I think what we're talking about is I guess I would define it ethically as going towards the good, where the good is an increase in peace or increase in the likelihood of peace, increase in humanitarian humanitarian needs being met, increase in respect and honoring of differences and the needs of those differences. It feels like that's what we mean by a solution. And of course it's temporary because other things happen, but sort of moving on average toward the good, or like this, the arc of the moral arc of the universe type idea. And it feels to me like what isn't moving towards the good is making any decisions at all right now. I just want to say, like, people talked about having an AI pause, which I still think is an interesting idea, but not tractable. This may also be an interesting idea, but not tractable, but to have like a complete ceasefire while we do some thinking. I mean, that may not be tractable, but that feels like the right thing to do, because it's like, okay, this is a new situation.
Yeah, there are, I think, several categories of solution. For the political actors, like the various governments, the Netanyahu government, the Egyptian government, the Russian government, the US government, there's like certain things that you do that you need to do, and you need to be seen as doing them. And if you aren't seen as doing them, then you have a political problem. So they have a whole set of solutions.
Well, solutions, those are solutions around public opinion. That matters.
Exactly.
That matters.
And that matters. And so, for example, the Israelis will probably have to launch a ground invasion into Gaza, which they desperately don't want to, because the scale of the Israeli casualties just far exceeded anything considered acceptable by anybody. And of course, the Palestinians would say that our casualties have always exceeded what we believed was acceptable. When I was looking up the Gaza history, there was a piece in the Wikipedia, a little chart in the Wikipedia article that showed the casualties from the 2014, the last time there was a big flare up in the Gaza Strip. And it actually had, number of Palestinian casualties compared to number of Israeli casualties. So it might be like, the ratio might be like 100 to 1. We'll put the link to the article in the discussion, but it would be like 100 Palestinian casualties to 1 Israeli casualty. So, I hate all these discussions are just so horrible. The discussion, well, I proportionately have suffered more than you, so there. I mean, that's just ridiculous, right? It doesn't make any sense. I think what's really bad, non-productive, doesn't lead to a solution is, and I've spoken about this before, is invoking this feeling of humiliation in other people.
And despair.
And despair. Thank you. Despair is an important addition to that. And Hamas, for them to do this, for that level of inhumanity to occur, they were despairing, and a feeling of humiliated humiliation and a desire for revenge that was just so so huge. And I'll make this point and I'll stop. And some might argue, well, how can anything like this ever be anything that's consistent with human rights or anything like that? And I would just say that, over centuries, humans have attempted to define what is acceptable in terms of war, laws of war, which did not exist at all 700 years ago and which exist now, are followed and enforced fitfully, but as inadequate as it is today, it is better than the no rules or no kind of norms around this. And behavior, no matter who conducts it, that is against these norms, I believe, one of the few things I'll say I really believe, just has to be condemned. There's a very good book, which I'm going to put a link to it. It's called The Internationalists. And it's the history of the evolution of the law of war. And it starts off in the 1500s and 1600s. It takes you all the way to the formation of the UN. And it's a fascinating read. And the authors make the point, which is, I believe, correct, that people are very cynical of attempts to outlaw war or develop international laws about war. And they just mock these efforts. But you have to accept, you have to concede, even the harshest critics, that we have made over the last several centuries significant advances in thinking about what is acceptable behavior by some party in a conflict versus what is no longer acceptable behavior. In fact, the fact that there were Nuremberg trials was a really huge step.
I totally agree. We are. Sorry, were you done with what you wanted?
Yeah, that's it. And trying to at least say, okay, we understand that there are conflicts that we haven't figured out how to resolve yet, and that sometimes you guys are going to get involved in fisticuffs, you guys and gals. But look, here's a set of rules that we've developed that you've signed on to, because almost everyone has signed on to them, and you need to abide by them.
Yes,
and so I wonder,
so that's evidence that the moral arc of the universe turns towards good. In an alternate, no. I mean, but why do you roll your eyes? Because I thought you would agree with that, and so I'm curious if I'm not getting it right.
Yes. Why do I roll my eyes on the moral arc of the universe turning to good? Because, there's no guarantee. I mean, you have to have a certain set of beliefs that is, in fact, to really have confidence in that view. So I want to believe that the moral arc of the universe tends toward good. I think that, sometimes there are these alternate universes where good is not even competitive. I just don't think it's a law of nature.
I think that the phrase that the moral arc of the universe turns towards good isn't necessarily a law of nature. The moral is a human creation.
Yes.
So while we're part of nature, this is part of the human mind, the human way of being, right? The morality, the morality that we create and live in. But what I'm saying is, I've been thinking about this ever since I was a kid, is I guess I always contrast what's happening in a bad situation with what could have happened. So sometimes when I was a kid, I would hear about a shooting or someone being kidnapped or something, or the risk of nuclear war, and I would say, okay, but I would say to myself, but people aren't driving up on the sidewalks and arbitrarily injuring people. They're not doing that. So that suggests that people choose to behave according to the laws of traffic. They're not doing that. So now that we've had situations where people are running people over with their cars, then I think people's response to that was horror. It wasn't celebration. Okay, now that we have people who are actually sometimes celebrating in response to death, then I think, okay, but that isn't taken up by the rest of the world. So, I just keep comforting myself with these alternative universes that
Yes,
are
yeah,
worse.
yeah.
And I do have hope that we are living in a universe that is growing in its appreciation of what I call the human problem, this thing where as smart as we are, we haven't figured out how to live with each other, how to honor each other, how to honor ourselves, how to live in peace, right? And I think we're encroaching on it. If you look at it as through the centuries, not through the decades, I think we're encroaching on looking at that problem from all sides and trying to find a real way to address it. I won't say solve it. So I do think the moral arc, this thing that we create, is very, morality is a creative act, right? So I think that the moral arc turned towards good because that's what it's almost circular. That's the definition of morality. And we are getting, a perfect example is Nuremberg trials, the laws of war. Another example is the international response to this incident. People are, right? I mean, I think it's hard to find a country that officially says like, great job, Gaza,
Right, right.
or great job, Israel, for the missiles, or, it's like everyone's kind of like,
Right.
how can this not escalate?
Yes, exactly. That's what everybody's trying to figure out, is how to make sure that it doesn't escalate.
But see, that's a positive sign that our goal, that the general goal is non-escalation. I mean,
Yeah,
that
it's
touches me.
positive
That
for
touches me.
it's just not positive for the people involved in it. The people involved in it, it's not positive at all.
No, it's not positive. It's not positive for anyone either. I mean, even if you're not physically there, you know someone who's there, or you're affected by it in various ways, or you're questioning your own experience, or you're questioning someone else's experience. Hopefully you're not involved in the sort of disinformation that we see now about, the one concern I have is people posting, they were just talking about this at the Emergent Risk International briefing on this, about people posting videos of students protesting the Israel relationship with the Israeli relationship with Palestinians, and sort of claiming that those protests happen now.
And when they're, yes.
And that endangers the lives of those students and people who
Right.
are extreme and think that you can't ever question Israel, but also and then on the other hand, the people who believe that only Palestinians should have a voice. And there's
Yeah, when I see
it's
anything
risky.
that purports to show images or videos,
Yeah.
I immediately just assume it is either emotionally manipulative, if it's
Yeah.
true, or just disinformation. And more often it is the latter.
Yeah, it could be a conscious attempt at disinformation and to influence people. And I think they were suggesting in this briefing to follow both Israeli news sources and Palestinian news sources, so you get, regardless of the accuracy,
you have to read them all.
you have to understand what people are thinking, regardless
Right.
of how accurate it is. You need to know what information they're getting. We probably should close up soon. We're not going to do Shadancik today, by the way.
No,
Note.
not the right time, and we could keep babbling and perhaps just inch a little closer to something useful, but maybe not even.
I think we're doing a good job, because I just want to say one sort of more thing, and I have some poems, of course.
Okay, of course, I'd like to hear
commentary.
them.
One thing I wanted to say is that you do a good job of representing, I think, sort of the psychology of what might be going on for Palestinians. But I also think it's really, I guess maybe I did a good job, I'm not sure. I think Israelis are so mixed on this. there are many, many, many different kinds of Israeli thinking on this. And I think that the one hope that, from what my conversations with people I know in Israel or from Israel, the one hope that's shared is, this idea that Torah is still being written, this idea that we don't have to assume that this is going to escalate. We don't have to assume that. Even though Netanyahu is who he is, even though the situation was what it was, even though people were killed beyond belief, even though there's so much suffering and there's hostages and all those things, it's like, can we hold this? There's this, you probably know about the Jewish tradition of putting a mezuzah
Yes, of course. Yeah.
on any kind of threshold or door as just a form of protection. And there's a way I think that we could sort of put a mezuzah in our hearts around this, in a spiritual sense of just like holding it in the possibility of a different future. So I wanted to say that clearly.
Good.
Yeah.
I
for some
support
poetry?
that.
All right, here we go. Here's two poems that I thought were perfect. First one is from Saint Francis of Assisi. It's very simple. Always from the child's hand, the sword should be removed. I think every nation is an infant.
Yes, yes, every nation is an infant.
And then yes, I was just, that's wonderful.
Yes.
And the other one that just speaks to me of this, and I might cry, this is Hafiz, a Persian poet. And this one helped calm me down when I was crying this morning, just because it speaks to how much we need God in these kind of situations. So it goes like this. Just sit there right now. Don't do a thing. Just rest. For your separation from God is the hardest work in this world. Let me bring you trays of food and something that you like to drink. You could use my soft words as a cushion for your head.
That's very good. Yes.
Thanks, Carmen, for talking about this with me with such careful heart, with such a careful heart.
But I feel like I do have a lot of respect for all the different emotions and motivations that are stirred up in this situation. And I think it's the responsibility of all of us to identify those more positive, little emotional incipients and just help it a little bit.
Yeah, a little seed of hope.
A little seed of hope. All right. Well, Julia, as always, it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
The same. Thanks, Carmen.
And we thank all of you who have listened, and we hope you find some tranquility or perspective by listening to us.
Yeah.